Have you ever felt the sudden chill when someone who once made you feel special begins to pull away without explanation? One day he's texting you good morning, making plans, laughing at your jokes, and the next it's like you're a ghost in his world. The silence isn't just loud, it's deafening, and you're left with a heart full of questions and a mind spinning with confusion. What changed? What did I miss? What did I do wrong? That sinking feeling, the one that makes your stomach twist and your chest tighten, it's real, it's painful, and it's more common than most people admit. You start replaying conversations, analyzing every message, every gesture, wondering if you were too much, too little, too late. But what if the answer isn't in what you said, but in what you didn't notice you were doing all along? The truth is, there are silent behaviors that slowly chip away at attraction, not because you're not good enough, not because you're not lovable, but because no one teaches us how some patterns, even when they come from love, can quietly push people away. This is about reclaiming your power. It's not about blaming yourself. It's about understanding yourself. And once you understand these patterns, you gain something incredibly valuable: clarity. The kind of clarity that saves you from heartbreak. The kind that helps you stop chasing people who were never meant to stay. And most importantly, the kind that helps you show up as your fullest, most radiant self, without fear of being left behind. So stay with this, because by the end of this journey, you'll no longer be asking, why did he leave? You'll be standing in your strength, saying, if he couldn't see my worth, he was never meant to stay. That shift alone can change everything. It's not about learning tricks to keep someone. It's about unlearning habits that make you forget your value. This is your invitation to stop guessing, stop second-guessing, and start growing. The truth is, men rarely leave because of one big moment. It's almost never a dramatic scene or a final straw. Most of the time, they drift because of a series of quiet signals they pick up on, often without even realizing it. They start to sense a shift, a pattern, a vibe. And it's those subtle shifts, those emotional undercurrents that cause their interest to fade. Not because you're not enough, but because you're operating from a place of fear, not power. When you feel uncertain or insecure, you start acting in ways that are meant to protect your heart, but end up closing it. You may overgive, hoping to earn love. You may seek constant validation, trying to feel secure. You may silence your own needs just to keep the peace. These patterns come from a deep desire to be seen, chosen, and kept. But ironically, they often do the opposite, because the very things we do to avoid abandonment can sometimes trigger it. And that's what we're going to unlock. Those hidden behaviors that silently push men away. Not because you're broken, but because you're human. These are the habits no one warned you about. The ones that feel natural when you're falling for someone, but slowly drain the energy out of the connection. Once you see them clearly, you can stop walking on emotional eggshells and start walking in truth. There's a reason you felt this pattern before. There's a reason it keeps repeating. It's not your fault, but it is your moment to change. Because when you finally understand the unspoken rules of emotional attraction, you don't just become someone he wants. You become someone you're proud to be. And that pride, that self-trust, is what stops you from chasing people who can't meet you where you are. This is not about changing for someone. It's about choosing yourself. It's about knowing the difference between compromise and self-abandonment, between connection and dependency, between giving love and giving yourself away. That awareness is the key to everything. And it's what you'll carry with you, not just into your relationships, but into your life. So if you've ever felt that slow fade from someone you cared about, if you've ever watched interest dissolve without closure or clarity, stay with me, because this is your wake-up call. Not to become colder, not to shut down, but to rise up, to look at love through a new lens, one rooted in self-respect, not self-sacrifice. Because when you finally stop wondering why they left, you create space for the one who will never have to. This isn't about fear, this is about freedom. And that freedom starts when you understand what's been happening beneath the surface all along. You're not here to be chosen, you're here to choose. And the first person you must choose is you. When someone begins to pull away, your first instinct is often to hold on tighter, to prove your worth, to seek reassurance. You want to hear, I'm still here, because the silence feels like a threat. So you start asking more questions, checking in more often, giving more of yourself in the hope that he'll stay. But what feels like connection to you can feel like pressure to him. Not because you're too much, but because he's not equipped to be the source of your security. There's a hidden line between vulnerability and emotional dependence. When you cross it, even unintentionally, it can shift the entire dynamic. Needing reassurance is human, but needing constant affirmation that he still likes you, that he's still invested, that you haven't lost him. It begins to signal a lack of inner confidence, and that, quietly and powerfully, changes the way he sees you. Emotional confidence isn't about never having doubts. It's about not needing someone else to erase them for you. It's about being able to sit with uncertainty without collapsing into fear. That kind of strength is magnetic, because it tells him you're not there to be rescued. You're there to be chosen, and only by someone who is steady enough to walk beside you, not someone you have to chase for answers. Every time you reach out in panic, you're asking someone else to fix an emotional wound they didn't cause. And that's a heavy burden to place on anyone. It starts to feel like the relationship exists to manage your anxiety instead of to build a connection. That shift is subtle, but it's enough to make someone retreat, not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to hold what you haven't learned to hold yourself. What truly draws people in is emotional self-possession, the kind that says, I care about you, but I won't collapse if you pull away. That doesn't mean pretending not to care. It means trusting that you are enough, with or without constant proof from someone else. And when you carry that energy, everything changes. You stop trying to win affection. You stop chasing closure. You stop fearing silence. There is nothing more powerful than a woman who is grounded in her own presence. A woman who doesn't beg for attention, but commands respect through her calm, her clarity, and her ability to stay composed even when things feel uncertain. That is what creates desire. Not desperation, not emotional urgency, but a quiet kind of confidence that says, I want you, but I don't need you to complete me. When your sense of value comes from within, you stop needing constant reminders from someone else. And ironically, that's when people are most drawn to you, because they can feel that you're not performing, not pushing, not trying to manipulate outcomes. You're just being. And that energy is irresistible. It creates space. It allows the other person to lean in, to explore, to connect, freely, not under pressure. If you constantly ask, do you still care? What you're really saying is, I don't trust I'm enough unless you confirm it. But real confidence is built in the moments when you don't ask that question. When you choose to believe in your worth without waiting for someone else to validate it. That's not arrogance. That's self-trust. And it's the foundation of every healthy connection. So instead of seeking reassurance, give yourself what you're craving. Instead of asking, are you still interested? Ask yourself, am I still grounded in who I am? Because when you start showing up from a place of wholeness, you change the dynamic completely. You become someone who adds value to a relationship, not someone who relies on it for survival. People are attracted to presence, to poise, to emotional steadiness, not perfection, but resilience. When you stop needing someone to prove their interest every day, you give them the space to want to. You stop suffocating the connection with fear and start nurturing it with trust. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to desire closeness, but those needs should never come at the cost of your dignity. You should never have to beg for consistency or twist yourself into anxiety just to feel seen. The right connection will make you feel safe, not small, but that begins with how you hold yourself. When you trust your own worth, you stop asking, why is he fading? And you start asking, does this energy deserve access to me? That shift from fear to discernment is where your power lives. And the moment you tap into it, everything starts to align. Not because you're doing more, but because you finally stopped chasing and started choosing. This isn't about being cold, it's about being centered. It's about walking into relationships with a full cup instead of an open wound. When you stop asking others to fill you, you naturally attract those who are already full. And that's the kind of connection that lasts, not because it's perfect, but because it's rooted in two people who know how to stand strong on their own. You don't need to beg for love to stay. You only need to be true to yourself. And anyone who truly sees you, really sees you, will never need convincing. When you give too much too soon, you unknowingly shift the balance of power in the relationship. You overextend yourself, hoping to show your love, your loyalty, your depth, and deep down you hope he'll see that and give it back. But the more you pour out, the more it feels like he pulls back, and the emptier you become. Not because your love isn't valuable, but because it's being offered in a way that feels unearned, unmatched, unreciprocated. You think generosity will build closeness, but what it often builds is quiet resentment. His disinterest isn't always about what you lack. Sometimes, it's about what you gave before he was ready to receive. We live in a world that celebrates effort, especially in love. But effort, when misplaced, becomes exhaustion. You keep doing, giving, proving, believing that your devotion will make him stay. But relationships don't grow from one-sided sacrifice. They grow from mutual investment, from shared energy, from earned respect. The moment you start giving from a place of fear of losing him, fear of being forgotten, you stop giving from strength. And men can feel that. Even if they don't fully understand it, they sense the imbalance. The hard truth is that overgiving doesn't build desire, it erodes it. Desire thrives in mystery, in space, in the natural dance between two people learning each other. When you give everything up front, your time, your energy, your body, your soul, without letting things unfold organically, you rob the connection of its rhythm. It becomes saturated, heavy, predictable, and what once felt magnetic begins to feel obligatory. The irony is, the more you try to be enough for someone else, the more you start to disappear. You lose your spark in the name of love. You put his needs above your own. You cancel your plans, rearrange your priorities, shrink your boundaries, all in the hope that he'll appreciate it. But people don't fall in love with sacrifice. They fall in love with aliveness, with authenticity, with someone who values herself enough to say, I'm willing to give, but not at the cost of who I am. There is a difference between generosity and overextension. One is rooted in abundance, the other in fear. And the most powerful thing you can do is recognize when your giving has stopped being a choice and started becoming a plea. Because no man stays in a dynamic where he feels smothered by unearned devotion. It doesn't inspire loyalty, it invites complacency. He stops working for your attention because he doesn't have to. He doesn't chase because he's never had to earn you. Real connection isn't built on how much you give. It's built on how much you honor yourself while giving. When you stop overgiving, you don't become selfish. You become selective. You give from a place of value, not desperation. You show love, not because you're afraid of losing someone, but because you're overflowing with confidence that you're already enough. You were never meant to audition for love. You were meant to express it freely, with someone who mirrors your energy, not drains it. If you're the only one showing up with full effort, it's not a connection. It's an imbalance. And imbalance doesn't sustain attraction. It breeds tension, confusion, and eventually distance, because no one wants to feel like they're on a pedestal they didn't ask to stand on. It makes them uncomfortable. It makes them retreat. But when you give in alignment with your worth, when your giving is intentional, not excessive, it changes everything. He starts to value the time you offer because it's not given blindly. He starts to pursue you, not because you gave more, but because you pulled back and made room for him to show up. That's the secret. That's the shift. Every time you stop yourself from over-explaining, over-apologizing, over-accommodating, you send a message. Not to him, but to yourself. You say, I matter here too. My needs are real. My energy is sacred. And that energy commands respect in a way no amount of overgiving ever can. It's not about holding back love, it's about holding back fear. It's about refusing to be driven by the anxiety of not being enough, because you are, even without overcompensating, even without proving, even without bending over backwards for someone who hasn't earned that level of access to you. You don't have to prove your love by draining yourself for it. The right person won't need you to overextend. They'll meet you with equal effort, with equal passion, with equal heart. And until that happens, you owe it to yourself to preserve your energy, to protect your peace, to stay rooted in your value. Giving should feel light, joyful, liberating, not heavy with expectation or laced with fear. If it feels like you're losing yourself just to keep someone else, it's not love. It's survival. And love should never feel like something you have to survive. Start giving with boundaries, with balance, with the belief that the right connection doesn't require you to exhaust yourself. You're not here to prove you're worthy of being loved. You're here to remember that you already are. And from that place, you'll attract the kind of love that doesn't take more than it gives. The kind that honors you. The kind that stays. When your entire life begins to orbit around one person, you slowly start to disappear. Not all at once. Not in some obvious way. But piece by piece. You stop doing the things that once made you feel alive. You stop showing up for your passions. Your routines shift, your priorities change, not because you decided to evolve, but because you started molding yourself to fit into someone else's world. That's when the imbalance deepens, not just between you and him, but within yourself. Men lose interest not because you care, but because they stop seeing the woman who had a spark of her own, the one who had a life that moved with purpose, with independence, with direction, the one who wasn't always available because she had her own world to tend to, the one who wasn't waiting by the phone, but answering it between living her truth. There's something magnetic about someone who's deeply invested in their own life, not busy to avoid intimacy, but full because they've built something they love outside of the relationship. Attraction begins with energy, the kind that's alive with self-worth, the kind that doesn't need someone else to fill the space. When you abandon your own path to walk someone else's, they can feel it. The weight of being someone's everything isn't flattering, it's suffocating. Because now, they're not dating you. They're responsible for your happiness. And that pressure, even when unspoken, becomes overwhelming. You were never meant to shrink to fit into someone else's routine. You were meant to expand, to grow, to move forward, with or without anyone beside you. That's not selfish. That's sovereign. A woman who owns her time, her energy, her focus becomes unforgettable. Not because she demands attention, but because she commands it by how she carries herself. She doesn't give up her passions to make someone else comfortable. She invites them into her world, and if they can't keep up, she keeps going. When you center a man in your life before he's centered you in his, you tilt the scales. You teach him without words that he is the priority and you are optional, that his plans matter more than yours, that his time is valuable and yours is disposable. That's not love. That's surrendering your worth in disguise. And the worst part, you don't even realize it until you're exhausted, disconnected, and wondering why he's pulling away. The truth is, people value what's scarce, what requires effort, what stands on its own. When you're always available, always saying yes, always there, it's not seen as love. It's seen as a given, as expected, as background noise. But when you stay rooted in your world, your goals, your peace, your growth, you become someone worth showing up for. Not because you're distant, but because your presence has depth. And depth is rare. A man is not the sun. You don't revolve around him. You are your own light, your own rhythm, your own universe. And when someone enters your orbit, it should be as a partner, not as your center. Ships aren't meant to replace your identity. They're meant to support it, to enhance it. And if you're losing yourself just to be with someone, then you're not in love. You're in a trap you didn't even see forming. Bring the focus back to you, not in a cold, detached way, but in a sacred, intentional way. Start filling your days with the things that make your soul breathe. Reignite the parts of yourself you've neglected. Go back to the activities, the habits, the dreams you once delayed. You'll be surprised how quickly your energy shifts, how your confidence grows, how you no longer need constant attention because you're giving yourself the care you once outsourced. People are drawn to wholeness. To individuals who love their life so much, it becomes an invitation, not a request. When you glow from within, you attract without effort. You don't need to prove. You don't need to chase. You simply are, and that's enough. Because the right one won't want to dim your light. They'll want to rise beside it. So stop editing yourself. Stop pausing your life. Stop believing that love requires you to abandon your own journey. True love meets you on your path. It doesn't ask you to leave it behind. The woman who chooses herself even when it's hard, even when she's scared, even when the silence feels unbearable. That woman doesn't just attract interest. She commands devotion. You're not here to be an accessory to someone else's story. You're the main character in your own. And the moment you return to that truth, the energy shifts. The dynamic resets. The power realigns. Not because you forced it, but because you remembered who you are. A woman with a life so full, so vibrant, so rooted that anyone who steps into it knows. This is not someone you play with. This is someone you rise for. There is a quiet mistake that many women make when they want to build closeness. They share everything too soon. Not just facts, but fears. Not just stories, but scars. The intention is pure. You want to connect. You want to be seen. You want to show him that you trust him. But what feels like vulnerability can sometimes come across as emotional flooding. It overwhelms rather than draws in. It doesn't deepen the connection, it rushes it. And anything that's rushed is at risk of collapsing before it ever becomes real. True intimacy takes time. It isn't built in hours of late-night texting or endless conversations in the early stages. It's built in the slow unveiling of who you are, layer by layer. When you share too much too quickly, you bypass the natural process of discovery. You hand over the most personal parts of yourself to someone who hasn't earned the right to hold them. Not because they're a bad person, but because the relationship isn't strong enough yet to carry the weight of your whole story. Oversharing isn't the same as being open. Openness invites connection. Oversharing demands it. It seeks immediate validation. It asks for emotional commitment before trust has been built. And when you place your deepest wounds into someone's hands before you even know if they can handle them, you risk being met with silence, discomfort, Or worse, disinterest. Not because your pain isn't valid, but because it was delivered without foundation. Men lose interest when the emotional pacing feels forced. It's not that they lack depth or empathy. It's that they, like anyone else, need time to build emotional safety before they can truly hold space for someone else's heart. When you fast forward the emotional bond, you don't give him room to feel his own feelings about you. You're shaping the story before he's had a chance to write his part in it. There is power in keeping certain things sacred, at least in the beginning. Not because you're hiding, but because you're protecting what is still healing. Because you respect yourself enough not to hand your entire heart to someone whose hands you haven't learned to trust yet. That isn't being guarded. That's being wise. That's knowing that your story deserves reverence, not just reaction. Let your life unfold slowly. Let him earn access to the chapters that matter. The most powerful connections aren't born in instant emotional downloads. They're built in moments of shared presence, quiet understanding, and consistent effort over time. You don't need to pour out every detail to prove that you're real. Your energy, your depth, your stillness, they speak for you. And the right person won't need a flood of emotion to recognize your value. He'll sense it in the way you carry yourself, in the calm behind your words, in the grace with which you reveal your truth, piece by piece. When you overshare, you're trying to force clarity. You want to know where you stand. You want to create closeness before it naturally arrives. But closeness that is rushed becomes closeness that feels heavy. And what's heavy early on rarely lasts, because it was built on emotional urgency, not mutual growth. Instead of trying to secure the bond by revealing everything, trust that holding some things back is not manipulation, it's maturity. It's understanding that emotional exposure without emotional stability is a recipe for disappointment. You are not obligated to explain your whole life to someone in order to be loved. You are not more lovable because you bleed for someone who hasn't yet shown you they know how to stop the bleeding. Give yourself permission to be mysterious, to be slow, to be careful with your soul. The parts of you that have taken years to build and protect should not be given away in minutes. They are not conversation topics. They are sacred spaces, and only someone who shows up consistently, respectfully, and with genuine curiosity deserves to be invited in. When you stop oversharing, you begin reclaiming your emotional power. You stop giving people the blueprint to your healing, or you stop handing over the map to your insecurities. You become someone who is not just emotionally open, but emotionally intentional. And that intention is what creates real connection, not forced closeness. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be understood, but true understanding comes from mutual patience, not emotional exposure. If someone is truly meant for you, they will stay long enough to hear the full story, and they will honor it, not because you gave it all away too soon, but because they took the time to earn your trust. So hold your heart with both hands. Let it open slowly. Let it bloom in its own season. You do not owe your inner world to someone who hasn't yet shown the depth to explore it with care. Your past, your pain, your truth. It's not just information. It's gold. Not everyone deserves to touch it. Let the wrong ones walk away, confused by your calm. Let the right ones stay, drawn in by the quiet strength of your boundaries. You are not hiding, you are healing. And in that healing, you are becoming the kind of woman who no longer needs to overshare to feel seen, because you've already seen yourself. And that kind of self-awareness is more powerful than anything you could ever say. When you silence your own voice just to keep someone close, you start betraying yourself in ways that slowly erode your spirit. You nod when you want to say no. You smile when your heart is unsettled. You agree with things that go against your values, just to avoid conflict, just to appear easygoing, just to keep him interested. But here's the truth. What keeps someone in your life shouldn't be your silence. It should be your strength. If a connection can't withstand your truth, it was never real in the first place. The need to keep peace at all costs often comes from a place of fear. The fear of being too difficult. The fear of being labeled as dramatic. The fear of being left. So you make yourself small. You convince yourself that being agreeable is the key to being loved. But what it really does is train the other person to believe that your needs don't exist. And once someone gets used to your silence, they stop asking how you feel. They stop checking in. They stop trying because you've made it easy for them not to. This is how relationships become one-sided, not because someone was always selfish, but because you unconsciously taught them that your boundaries are flexible, that your standards are negotiable, that your comfort can be compromised without consequence. And over time, the resentment builds, quietly, slowly, until you're no longer in love. You're just enduring, waiting, hoping that one day they'll finally notice what you've been too afraid to say. But you were not born to be silent. You were born to speak with clarity, to live with purpose, to stand tall in your values even when it shakes the room. A high-value woman does not fear losing someone who can't handle her honesty. She knows that truth is not a weapon, it's a mirror, and anyone who runs from it is not ready for real intimacy. The moment you start compromising your standards to keep someone, you've already lost the version of yourself that knew you deserved more. You are not difficult for wanting respect. You are not too much for asking to be heard. Your needs are not negotiable when your peace is on the line. Love without respect isn't love. It's control dressed up as compromise. You don't have to yell to be powerful. You don't have to argue to make your point. Sometimes the most impactful message is simply, "This doesn't work for me," followed by your willingness to walk away. That is strength. That is grace. That is the kind of energy that makes people rise to meet you, or leave because they can't. And that's okay. Let them leave. Let anyone who is intimidated by your standards remove themselves. You are not here to convince anyone of your worth. You are here to embody it. The right person won't be put off by your boundaries. They'll be drawn to them, because boundaries are a sign of self-respect, and self-respect is the foundation of every healthy relationship. When you stop silencing your needs, you stop attracting people who benefit from your silence. You shift your energy. You stop being a placeholder in someone else's life and start being the whole story in your own. You walk into every interaction with the quiet confidence that says, "I know who I am, I know what I need, and I'm not afraid to lose what doesn't align with that." That kind of clarity doesn't scare the right person, it attracts them. It lets them know they're dealing with someone who honors herself. Someone who isn't looking for a savior, but a partner. Someone who understands that love is not proven by how much you can tolerate, but by how deeply you are willing to be yourself. So speak. Ask for what you need. Say no when something doesn't feel right. Express your truth with love, with strength, with unapologetic clarity. And if that makes someone uncomfortable, let them feel it. Growth is often uncomfortable, but nothing is more painful than living a life where you constantly betray yourself just to be accepted. You weren't created to be agreeable at the expense of your soul. You were made to live in alignment, to be bold in your truth, to protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. And the more you honor that truth, the more you become magnetic. Not to everyone, but to the right ones. The ones who respect you, the ones who rise with you, the ones who see your strength, not as a threat, but as an invitation to go deeper. Your voice matters. Your needs matter. Your standards matter. And the moment you stop lowering them for temporary attention, you start commanding the kind of love that lasts. Not because you begged for it, but because you became it. You became the standard. The mirror, the reminder that real love never asks you to shrink. It asks you to rise. And when you rise, the ones who are meant to walk beside you won't need to be convinced. They'll already be there, matching your energy step for step. When you make someone the center of your happiness, you give away your power without even realizing it. You stop being the author of your life and become a character in someone else's story. Every mood they have, every decision they make, every shift in their attention begins to dictate how you feel. You wake up hoping for a message. You fall asleep replaying every word they said. Your joy starts to hinge on whether they show up, and your peace begins to depend on how much love they give you that day. That is not love. It's emotional captivity disguised as devotion. You were never meant to hand over your happiness like it's a gift for someone else to protect. Your happiness is your responsibility. Your emotions are your territory. The moment you believe someone else is the reason you feel whole is the same moment you risk being shattered when they walk away. Because no one, not even the most loving partner, can carry the weight of your fulfillment. It's too much to ask, and it's too dangerous to depend on. People don't lose interest because you love them. They lose interest when that love starts to feel like a cage. When it stops being free and starts being needy, when your affection turns into possession, when your joy depends on their consistency rather than your own inner peace. That's when the energy shifts. That's when they start to pull away. Not because they don't care, but because they feel the unspoken pressure to be everything for someone who has nothing left for themselves. The most magnetic people aren't the ones who chase love. They're the ones who live in it. They wake up in purpose, move through their day with passion, and rest in the quiet confidence that they are already enough. Love for them is a complement, not a cure. A partner, not a prescription. They aren't waiting to be saved from loneliness or rescued from emptiness. They are already whole. And because of that, they attract people who want to add to that wholeness, not take from it. When you stop relying on others to keep you emotionally alive, you start breathing differently. You stop feeling panicked when someone pulls away because you know your peace was never rooted in their presence. You stop interpreting silence as rejection because you've stopped measuring your worth by someone else's attention. You no longer feel lost when someone detaches, because you were never attached from a place of desperation. You were connected from a place of choice. That shift changes everything. You stop loving out of fear and start loving from strength. You stop clinging and start choosing. You stop chasing and start attracting. Because true love does not require you to lose yourself. It requires you to become more of who you truly are. It asks you to show up whole so that what you build together is a connection, not a dependency. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that devotion means sacrifice. That loving someone deeply means placing them on a pedestal and making their happiness your mission. But when you do that, you silently tell yourself that their needs matter more than yours. That their presence defines your joy. And when they sense that, whether consciously or not, the dynamic shifts. They stop seeing you as a partner and start feeling like they're carrying an emotional burden they never signed up for. Your job is not to be someone's emotional lifeline. Your job is to be so deeply rooted in your own happiness that anyone who enters your life feels inspired, not responsible. There's a freedom in that kind of love. The kind where both people come together, not to complete each other, but to elevate what already exists. That's what real intimacy looks like. Two people who are full on their own, choosing to share the overflow. Let go of the belief that someone else has to stay for you to be okay. You were okay before they arrived, and you'll be okay if they leave. That isn't cold. That's clarity. That's emotional maturity. That's the kind of mindset that doesn't just survive heartbreak, it prevents it. Because you're not building your life around someone who can walk away. You're building your life around values, vision, and self-love. Things no one can take from you. You deserve a love that walks beside you, not above you. A love that admires your strength, not feeds on your weakness. A love that says, I'm here because I want to be, not I'm here because you can't function without me. And the only way to create that kind of love is to stop making someone else your source of joy. You are the source. You are the light. And when you shine from within, the right one will see it and never ask you to dim it. You don't need to be completed. You need to be celebrated. But that celebration starts with you, with how you treat yourself, with how you speak to yourself, with how fiercely you protect your energy from anything and anyone that makes you forget your worth. Love yourself so deeply that no temporary absence shakes your foundation. Because when your happiness is no longer for sale, your heart becomes a place where only the worthy are welcome. This is your reminder. The right love will never require you to lose yourself to keep it. The real ones won't run from your independence. They'll rise to meet it, because your wholeness is not a threat. It's a standard, and only those who can meet you there deserve a place in your life. The moment you begin to doubt your own worth is the moment others start to treat you as if it's negotiable. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in tiny, almost invisible ways. You tolerate the unanswered texts. You accept the last-minute plans. You smile through the comments that make you uncomfortable. Not because you don't know better, but because a part of you believes that asking for more might make you lose everything. So you settle, quietly, slowly, until what once felt like love begins to feel like waiting for permission to be treated right. But here's the truth most people avoid. You are always teaching others how to treat you. Not through words, but through what you allow, what you let slide, what you make excuses for. Every time you remain silent when something disrespects you, you are giving it permission to happen again and again, until it becomes normal. Until disrespect is dressed up as romance. Until inconsistency is excused as he's just busy. Until emotional neglect is masked as independence. And by the time you realize it, you're already questioning your instincts, doubting your standards, and calling it love when it's anything but. Men don't lose interest because you expect too much. They lose interest when they realize you don't expect enough, when you've made it too easy, too available, too forgiving of behavior that should have been met with your silence, your absence, your boundary. A relationship without standards isn't love, it's tolerance. And tolerance doesn't build desire. It builds entitlement. The more you shrink to avoid conflict, the more you create a space where your voice is no longer heard. What makes you powerful isn't how much you can endure. It's how quickly you recognize what isn't aligned with your truth. You don't gain respect by being the most understanding. You gain respect by being the most self-respecting, by knowing the difference between patience and self-abandonment, between compassion and self-betrayal, between love and the desperate hope that someone will finally treat you the way you deserve, after you've accepted everything they've done to show you they won't. Standards are not walls, they are filters. They don't keep the right people out, they keep the wrong ones from wasting your time. And when you enforce them, not through drama but through grace, you don't just protect your peace, you elevate it. You create a new baseline for how love is allowed to show up in your life. Not based on someone else's comfort, but based on your own clarity. Clarity is everything. When you know who you are, what you bring, and what you will never again tolerate, you become unshakable. You stop negotiating with red flags. You stop second-guessing yourself every time someone pulls away. You stop looking